Revolutionary greetings to all at this extremely important meeting. Especially I want to greet all those people who have organised this meeting and the honoured guests and speakers who are also here in particular. And I want to extend greetings to all the people of Senegal, because we're going through a very important part of history. My name is IanB. I'm International Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, but here I'm acting as the coordinator for Africa of the International Ukrainian Anti-Fascist Solidarity. And we're working with the Union of Immigrants and Political Prisoners of Ukraine, who have funded this big meeting. And I want to explain again who I am, because you might wonder why you've got a person like myself who is obviously white and where I come in. I'm born in Britain. I'm from the working class. I'm a builder by trade, but I joined the Communist Party in 1972, and I worked with the Southern African Liberation Movement, ZAPU of Zimbabwe, and the African National Congress of South Africa. Now, during apartheid, what happened was we used apartheid against itself. In other words, the African National Congress and its armed wing, IanB, brought in white communists because we could move where the black comrades couldn't go. And we worked with IanB intelligence, and I was trained in Angola by the Soviet Union, by the Red Army and by the KGB. Now let me give time for that to be translated into French, and every now and then I will stop and let the translation go on. Now, unfortunately, we had some problem with raising the airfare. That's why I'm speaking to you like this. But I want to get on to the meat of what we're going to talk about now. As you are aware, or you should be aware, currently the Ukraine government, the fascist government, the Kiev government, backed by NATO, is training jihadists who are fighting against the freedom of the Sahel and of the Francophone countries. Russia, on the other hand, is supporting the growth of the economies of the Sahel, and I think very soon you'll be seeing the importance of Russian assistance to build the economy of Senegal and other West African countries. Because the time now, with the changes in the world, is that Africa must find its own place. Even the Russians or the Chinese or any other progressive forces are not going to do it for us. We have to do that for ourselves. Each country needs its own program, and when it has its own program, then we do need technical assistance, and I think Russia is the place. And hopefully, once Ukraine is free, the Western Ukraine hopefully we'll get a democratic government, a truly democratic government, and I think it's possible that the new Ukrainian government, when we eventually get there, will also be able to assist with the rebuilding of the Francophone countries of West Africa. So I think it's very important to understand the context in which things are happening. In any case, as I say, I trained in under the Soviets. I trained in Angola. The Soviets gave huge support, as did the Cubans, as did other socialist countries, to the liberation of various parts of Africa, particularly Southern Africa. And now we're seeing the liberation of West Africa, because I don't have to tell you that there was never really any freedom in most of the Francophone countries, and that whenever you got a good president, most notably Thomas Sankara, he was removed, murdered by the French. And even now they're trying to murder Ibrahim Traoré. So for us in Southern Africa, we love what Ibrahim Traoré is doing, and we're really happy that your new government in Senegal is linking with the Sahel states, and we're going to get true independence in West Africa. True independence in West Africa. Let me briefly go through the timeline, because there's been so much disinformation by the West on what really went on and how this war started. First of all, when Gorbachev, who many of us regard as a traitor to the movement, made an agreement that Germany should be united, he made an agreement with the USA. A promise was made that NATO would not move east of Germany, but in fact it has. All the time, Russia has complained, we don't want NATO on our doorstep, we don't want NATO on our doorstep. But as you've seen, NATO is not a defensive organization, NATO is an aggressive organization. We saw NATO aggression in Yugoslavia, we saw it in Iraq, we saw it in Afghanistan, and close to you, we saw it in Libya. We saw the murder of Muammar Gaddafi, followed by the genocide against black Libyans, and followed by the reintroduction of the slave trade in Africa. This was what has happened through NATO. Now they're trying to tell us that they're just supporting a free Ukraine. So, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, there was a peaceful coexistence between Russia and Ukraine. That peaceful coexistence came to an end in 2014, when a coup, which the Americans have admitted they put $4 billion into the Maidan uprising, $4 billion, and that uprising was attended by Victoria Nuland, who was the main organizer of it, Deputy Secretary of State, and which is Deputy Foreign Minister. and the crowd was addressed by John McCain, a senior US politician. And following that, now what then happened was Crimea broke away with the help of Russia, because the Crimeans are not Ukrainians by ethnicity. This coup was anti-Russian and was against ethnic Russians living in Ukraine, and ethnic Russians form the majority in eastern and southern Ukraine and Crimea. So Crimea broke away. The Donbass republics broke away because they didn't want to be ruled by fascists. And these fascist groups had been there since the Second World War. So, in any case, Vladimir Putin, who was blamed for the war, he tried to negotiate. 2014, 2015, he tried to negotiate. Nothing happened. And they kept attacking. Those republics which had declared independence were being attacked by fascist forces. And it was threatened that the Russian-speaking people of those areas, Lugansk and Donetsk, would be massacred. They said this. In the end, after trying to negotiate, after 8 years, Vladimir Putin sent in forces, and with the idea it was a show of strength. The forces went in February. In March, they actually signed an agreement to say that to recognize the independence of these places and to make sure that fascism wasn't there in Ukraine, that NATO didn't stretch to Ukraine. The agreement was signed by by Zelensky, the current president of Ukraine, and then the Prime Minister of Britain came and tore up the agreement, said, no, you must fight. So a peace agreement was signed in March 2022. Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, said, tear it up. Now I want to come to this man, Zelensky himself, because after the coup there was political turmoil in Ukraine. In 2019, Zelensky came through, by the way, a comedian is a well-known comedian on Ukrainian television. Zelensky stood as president, and he stood on a peace ticket. He said 70% of the population of Ukraine voted for him, not because he was Zelensky, but because he wanted peace. But we know that 30%, the fascist groupings, are the ones who controlled the army and the police. So they would not allow that peace to happen. And those are the sections who were supported by the West. And so now you have this war. But we in Africa know who started the war. It's the same enemies as have murdered our leaders. It's the same enemies which have occupied Africa. And it's now time that Africa gave back solidarity to Russia and to those countries which are progressive and will work with us not as our masters but as our partners. That is very important. Now, one thing that we have recognized that the French now seem to be doing in Senegal and in Côte d'Ivoire is that they've realized that they can't rule Africa anymore by force. It looks like they want to go back to the British system. The Anglophone countries are still under the control, the economic control of Britain and USA, but they're not under the same military control. So what we think is that that Macron is going away from direct control, but he's trying to get indirect control through continuing control of the economy. And this is where we want to make it very clear what we think should be done. Now I'm speaking from the point of view of my party, the Zimbabwe Communist Party. The Zimbabwe Communist Party calls itself Scientific Socialist and Pan-Africanist. Scientific Socialist and Pan-Africanist. Because we believe that we have to look at how we move towards building socialism in Africa. But before we can do that, we need a national democratic economy. We can't move straight to socialism from capitalism, and with that from capitalism which is under outside control. We have to start with economic planning, and we need a plan which is agreed to by all the people. When I say a national democratic economy as opposed to a socialist economy, what we mean is this. First of all, the banks must be either nationalized or at least under control of the government. Secondly, all the minerals must be under national control. If we don't have the ability to mine them ourselves, foreign companies must come in as contractors, but knowing they're contracting to us and the minerals belong to us, but they must get their share as contractors, not that they must own our minerals. This is a different concept. And as far as possible, if we can mine things, if we can produce without foreign assistance, all the better. So we have to have this in mind, that we must take control of our own economies. We, as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, we talk about Marx, Engels, Lenin and Nkrumah, because Nkrumah was a visionary who understood not only is it important for Africa to get rid of imperialism, but from the very start in 1957, Nkrumah spoke about Africans taking responsibility for their own economies. Yeah, let's give it to... Now, what is our vision as the Zimbabwe Communist Party? What is our vision of Pan-Africanism? Now, in the past, we've got people like your former president, Leopold Senghor, who is on about negritude, about African tradition. Now, for us, some of those things are important, but what is more important is control of the economy. Because to talk about African tradition when the economy is under colonial hands does not make sense to us. So our Pan-Africanism is not Pan-Blackism, because in South Africa, for instance, we have Joe Slovo, who was one of the leaders of the armed struggle, who was a white man, a Jew. In North Africa, we have Ben Bella, we have Nasser of Egypt, and we have Gaddafi. These are all Pan-Africanists. They may not be black, but they were Pan-Africanists. So our Pan-African vision is not a racial vision. Although we recognize the particular oppression that the black majority has been subject to in the past. But to build Africa, we need a united African vision from Cape to Cairo. from Morocco to Madagascar. That is our vision.